really excited to have all of our guests because this is a really important topic. It's about leading a dignified life and also about equity. And we need to address these issues in Harrisburg. It's very important because as we see through the COVID crisis, people are affected in their housing and their food and their wages. A lot of people not working now. There are a lot of people who are unable to afford their rent and they fear eviction, or they fear that they won't be able to pay their mortgage at this time. And this has been very difficult. The food banks and those programs are really running as much as they can to get everybody to meet their needs. But it's really difficult when you don't have an income or when your income has been backlogged, because we know that many people, kind of like myself, who are working paycheck to paycheck, if you miss a paycheck, that's huge. That means the next month you're going to have a lot of more problems paying your rent. So this morning, we are also going to hear from Rep. Fiedler. Representative Elizabeth Fiedler could not be with us here today, but we are going to play her video shortly that she sent us. And she has an important message about housing and these evictions that are going on at the state level. So go ahead, Maria, play the video.
Hi, I'm State Representative Elizabeth Fiedler. I'm so sorry that I could not be with you in person, but I'm really glad to be part of this discussion about such an important topic. Housing is a human right, and we really need to make sure that every single person in our community here in South Philly and across the state has safe, affordable housing that they can count on always, but especially during a pandemic. We've been pushing on the state level to make sure that the eviction moratorium and foreclosure moratorium are extended. Obviously, very recently, the governor said that he does not have the power to do that. We've seen the federal government step in with a eviction moratorium that will assist many people. They need to fill out the paperwork. There are additional steps to making it happen, but we are certainly glad for every step that is taken to keep more people from losing their home, whether that would be to eviction or to foreclosure. In addition to that, in addition to the steps that have been taken at the federal level, I am working with some colleagues to spearhead an effort to pass a package of bills that we have in the State House right now. They are called the Safe at Home bills, and they would really increase the level of security that people across Pennsylvania have with their housing. So one step is to ensure that the governor does have the power to put in place and extend an eviction or foreclosure moratorium. That's a bill that I have with Representative Sarah Innamorato and Summer Lee, the eviction and foreclosure moratorium bill, making explicitly clear the governor does have power to do that. That's something that we think is really important because the governor obviously has the ability to talk with public health officials, to talk with people across the state, and to make decisions about what our communities need rather than relying, for example, on the federal government to make those decisions. Another piece of legislation I have is with Representative Austin Davis and Representative Morgan Cephas, and it's a bill that would improve on the existing PHFA rent relief and mortgage relief program. It's a program that's helping people across Pennsylvania, but could help more. And so we want to put more money into the rent and mortgage relief program. We want to see the cap increase so it's no longer as low as it is right now, which is about $700 for rent, about $1,000 for mortgage. We know a lot of people are expected to pay more than that. So we want to increase the cap. We also want to make sure that people do not have to be 30 days in arrears before they can get help. In South Philly, one thing that we hear from a lot of people, and I know this is true across the state, is that people don't have enough money to pay all of their bills. And so people have been in a really tough decision, making tough decisions about which ones to pay, especially since March when the pandemic hit. And for a lot of people, the first thing that they pay is for their housing, right? So whether that's paying their mortgage or paying their rent, they want to make sure they have a roof over their head, and then some other bills fall to the wayside as they don't have funds for it. So we really need to make sure that we get rid of the 30 days in arrears clause and allow people to seek rent and mortgage relief before they get in that tough spot, and make sure that they are able to pay their other bills. We know that for a lot of people, the challenges that they're facing right now, many of those already existed before the pandemic, right? We've seen a real downturn in the economy, people losing their jobs, certainly a lot of people who are facing really hard unemployment circumstances right now and prolonged situations. And we know there's a lot of other people who were already facing those challenges before, and this is only on top of it, right? So we need to make sure that as a state, we are doing absolutely everything we can to keep people in their homes. So that means eviction and foreclosure moratorium. That means fixing the current rent and mortgage relief program to make sure that more people can get help, and also cutting some of the red tape to simplify it, to make sure it's available to more people. And then also in the package of bills are bills from my colleagues, including Representative Maureen Madden and Mike Schlossberg, along with Representative Kenyatta, to really improve the mediation process and to take other steps that would help renters and homeowners across the state be able to keep their housing during this pandemic, which is obviously at the heart of our communities, right? When we see one person, two people, three people, four people get evicted on a block or on a street, it's not just impacting that family, right? We know it impacts our entire community. It impacts all the neighbors. It impacts the religious institution they attended, the rec center where their kids went after school, the local public school. And so everything that we can possibly do to keep people in their homes and to keep people as part of our communities, we have to be doing it. So that's why we have the Safe at Home bill package, which I'm very proud to be a part of. And we are working very hard with our colleagues in Harrisburg to try to get some of this legislation moving so that we can help people in our districts and across the state. And I want to thank everyone who, regardless of the role that they've played, has been trying very hard and fighting the good fight with us, either inside or outside the building, to make sure people do have a roof over their heads. So with that, I will say thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the discussion and all you're doing.
Okay, that was great. I really appreciate Representative Elizabeth Fiedler delivering that video message. Again, I say that she would have liked to have been here today, but this is campaign season, and I think she was like triple booked. And we see that in a lot of our schedules, but I really appreciate that she was able to make time for this video. And next, we have Cece Gerlach from Allentown City Council. She's doing important work at the local level. I wanted to give her a chance to speak about what she's doing in Allentown and about this really important subject. Go ahead, Cece.
Thank you. And yeah, thanks for hosting this. And I'm sure when people have an opportunity to watch, they will have learned a lot just to see, you know, what's really going on, both at the local level and then even as far as Philly. So here in Allentown, I've been on council about 9 months now. And, you know, you go in with this like really robust agenda, and then COVID hit. So COVID kind of slowed down some of the timing of everything. But what we're really focusing on is bringing affordable housing, but as policy. You know, far too often what we see with affordable housing is you'll have a program, you'll have a grant, you'll have a once and done type of situation. But that doesn't change structures, that doesn't change systems. So what we're looking at is having certain requirements, certain mandates, that when there is luxury housing that's going up in Allentown, specifically a lot of our luxury housing is going down M&Is, specifically on Hamilton Street, a couple of blocks. But recently I've noticed some luxury homes popping up near the waterfront, down near Bucky Boyle, since that's also going to be redeveloped. So what it says, what a workforce housing requirement would say is that, you know, for every X number of luxury luxury, above market rate homes that you're building or apartments that you're building, that you've got to also then provide a certain number of workforce units. We're using the term workforce rather than affordable, just because honestly, there's negative connotations with the word affordable. It's sad to say that, but workforce housing or affordable housing, it's for, it's for us. It's for regular working class people, mostly of whom don't quite fit in the poverty category. We make too much to be considered poor, but we don't make enough to really thrive on a daily basis. And like Tara was saying earlier, just one paycheck, a flat tire, a sick kid, a leaky ceiling, anything can just throw off our bills and just cause us to kind of spiral downward. So that's one thing that we're working on. And then in addition to that, we're looking at community benefits, and community benefits ties into some of these topics of this conversation, in that a community benefits ordinance would say that when there is development, it's great. We need cities to change, cities to evolve, but it's got to benefit the community, like in real tangible ways. So if that means providing a living wage, a $15 an hour wage, providing access to fresh fruits and vegetables to a real grocery store that's affordable for the community, recreational space, green space, affordable housing or workforce housing. So those are really two ordinances that we're looking at the city council level. We've got consultants who were here for a whole other reason, but we've told them, we've asked them to also look into this to see how we could incorporate this in our zoning laws and in our housing plan. So I look forward to seeing what the consultants come up with. I can tell you either way, I will be proposing legislation, and it might be adapted based on what the consultants say, but legislation will be proposed. Every planning commission, every board, every authority I've ever attended or sat on, the one consensus is we lack affordable housing in the Lehigh Valley in general, and it's specifically here in Allentown. And when you see, $1,000, $2,000, $2,500 a month apartments going up, but yet you see 70,000 people who are facing eviction and homelessness, and you've got people sleeping outside in tents, there's a mismatch on priorities. So it's going to really take bold leadership. It's going to take people who aren't taking money from developers, who aren't in their pockets, who don't care about getting invited to their little fancy golf club outings. It's going to take politicians who really are willing to step forward and put forth this legislation for the people, and not be in the pockets of the wealthy and the developers. So that's what we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Cece. I think that the work that you're doing in Allentown is so critical. I know, and I like that term, workforce housing. At the LVPC, they were talking about attainable housing in the rebranding of affordable housing, because housing right now is not even attainable for a middle-class individual. You know what I mean? Let alone somebody who's not making a fair wage. And we see that so often. I know that this pandemic, my rent actually went up. For a one-bedroom apartment where I live, it's supposed to be $1,800. For $1,800, that's not the rent that I'm paying, but that's what they want you to pay. I just think that you should be able to get so much more. We are a people that had, at one time in America, the dream was home ownership, to own a home, and now people can't even rent. And the process by which you go and get a home loan, so many people are not able to get that loan, but an apartment is even more than a mortgage. So it's a cycle that needs to end, and we need positive legislation at every level. And this is why fair wages are so important, because you can't get the mortgage, you can't get the lease, you can't get attainable housing or workforce housing if you don't have a wage that is sustainable. So very important stuff. Thank you so much, Cece. And I know Allentown is better off for having you as a city councilwoman. Next up, Kadida Kenner from the We the People campaign. Let's make sure you're unmuted. Good.
All right. Hello. Good morning, everybody. It is still morning. Happy to be here with you. Happy to join this panel. Good to see Cece. Nice to meet you. Say hi to. Nice to meet you. We are partners in some of this work on Fair Wage, Rock United. So good to see you here. And thank you, Tara, for inviting the We the People PA Action Campaign to be with you today. As mentioned, my name is Kadida Kenner. I'm Director of Campaigns for the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. But today I'm here today with the We the People PA Action Campaign. And I've been tasked, to talk about some of these issues and the policies around this. And so just to give a little background on the We the People campaign, we're thankful to have Tara Zrinski be one of our endorsers of the campaign. So is Representative Liz Fiedler. So we're thankful for that. We have a legislative agenda that I want to talk about a little bit, and that is what these candidates and these incumbents have endorsed, is that we have a legislative agenda to move Pennsylvania towards a more progressive legislative state here, where we can actually ensure that folks can thrive, not just survive. And so the We the People campaign is of, by, and for the people of Pennsylvania. Our goal is to ensure that everyone can thrive. Whether you are Black, white, brown, poor, rich, if you are in rural, suburban, urban Pennsylvania, we want everyone to thrive here in the state. And we're trying to move some good progressive legislation through the halls of Harrisburg to make sure that happens. And I'd be remiss to not mention, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. We're also in the midst of a movement for Black lives here in this state. And so what we're realizing right now is that this is an opportunity for us to reevaluate our priorities and our policies here in the state and move them forward. We can go together in moving these progressive policies forward. And so I know today we're talking about a dignified life and housing and food and the fight for 15. And the We the People campaign has been very engaged in the fight for 15. That's what we spent pretty much all of 2019 working on, trying to move legislators in Harrisburg to that $15 mark and beyond. We know that that's something closer to a living wage. It's still not even a living wage for most. We talk about $1,800 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. $15 an hour will not do that. And so that is something that we've been really focused on with the We the People campaign, is trying to fight for fair wages and a fair return for our work. Here we are in the global pandemic, and we have restaurant workers who are really putting themselves at risk daily. Reports coming out today saying that the likelihood, if you've contracted COVID, most likely you've eaten out at a restaurant. So imagine if you're just someone who's eating out at the restaurant, imagine what the restaurant workers are going through. And so as we've tried to fight for that $15 an hour minimum wage, we're trying to bring everyone along. We all go together in this. So the restaurant workers with one fair wage, because there makes no sense to continue to have poverty wages of $2.83 an hour here in the state of Pennsylvania for tipped workers. We need to end preemption and give back local control to folks like Cece, who knows what her folks in her city need. And so we can end preemption. We can make sure that the local municipalities have local control to raise the minimum wage. $15 an hour is a start. We need to go beyond that. And all the work that we did in 2019, we actually tried to move legislation for the first time. We had a vote out of the Senate, where the Senate actually voted to take minimum wage to $9.50 an hour in 2 years. It didn't help restaurant workers and others who rely on tips, but it was a start. And so we're going to continue to push for that. I want to note here, I'm joining today with Sarah Zrinski, and she's in the 138th district. And I have some statistics here that I think that your folks might want to know as it relates to the minimum wage in Northampton County. And we might be surprised, or maybe we're not surprised to know that those who are making, less than $15 an hour in this county, 55% of them are women, right? So we know that when low wages disproportionately impact women, they impact people of color. 27% of people of color in Northampton County are the ones who are making less than $15 an hour in wage. We also know, or we should know, that we assume lots of times that folks who are making $7.25 an hour, just college students or high school kids, but that's not accurate. In Northampton County, only 6% are 19 years or younger, meaning these are adults who are making low wages. 48% of them are over the age of 40, and that includes a lot of folks who have gone back to work after retirement to help supplement income and make ends meet. So when we're talking about, and 51% of these folks have some kind of college experience. So we're not talking about just the burger flippers that people like to talk about, right? These are folks who are working in home health care. These are folks who have some college education and are still making less than a living wage. And so we can do better. I'm in Northampton County and across Pennsylvania, and we need to continue to fight for legislation to raise the minimum wage. It's disgusting that Pennsylvania has the lowest minimum wage of every single state surrounding us. Even West Virginia has a higher minimum wage than Pennsylvania. We can do much better here in the state, and we can bring everybody along with us. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here with the We the People campaign is that we're fighting for not only to raise the minimum wage. We have a legislative agenda that we're thankful to have currently more than 60 General Assembly members currently endorsing our campaign. Lots out of Philadelphia and Harrisburg and Pittsburgh and Northampton County, right? So we're thankful to have all of these folks endorsing the campaign because we need to secure a fair return for work. We need to make sure that housing is affordable. As Representative Fiedler mentioned, it is a human right. It is a human right. We need to make sure that we are providing a great public education for our kids. Healthcare is important. And then in securing our democracy, we absolutely have issues here in the state lately popping up in terms of us being able to get to the polls and access the polls fairly in this election. And then I just want to, end this portion of my part of the panel by saying that with the We the People campaign, we truly believe that Black Lives Matter. And so we'll continue to fight for fair policing and an ending of over-incarceration of people of color here in the state.
Thank you so much, Kadida. That is always, I've always been so impressed with the We the People movement and the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. I think that the work that you're doing is so critical because it really pushes candidates to look deeper into the statistics and to the policy that we're trying to achieve in this progressive movement. And some of what you said is so relevant even to my own life. I was in the food service industry for over 20 years. It put me through college, it put me through grad school and thereafter, and sometimes I had a second job as a waitress, server, or bartender. And 283 is not even a wage. Like, you don't ever see any part of that 283, and you are so reliant on tips. And if you don't have, like right now with restaurants working at 25 to maybe 50% capacity, if you don't have the tables to flip, you are not going to even make $10 an hour. So you're lifting heavy things, you're moving around on your feet for 10 to 14 hours, sometimes double shifts, you're going up and down stairs, you're lifting ice buckets and washing walls when it's not busy. I mean, the things that you do in a restaurant are just worth so much more, and we treat people as if they're servants, not servers, like that, not that they're serving us. And it's a privilege to go out and to be served, and we should treat it as such. And I think you made such a critical point with the home healthcare workers. And I also want to bring up not only the home healthcare workers, but also people in childcare facilities are sometimes making minimum wage. These are the people that we entrust our children to. And sometimes they aren't even working a full 30 hours a week because they have a second job to pay the bills. They don't have health care. We have to make sure that the people who are taking care of our children are taken care of as well. I think that is critical. That's why it's so critical that we move this wage that has been stagnant for over 20 years while goods and services and products and food and everything else have gone up exponentially. We are still stagnant in our minimum wage. Unbelievable, and how it disproportionately affects women. and people of color. College graduates, 51%. This is not just about the people who flip burgers or who are the cashier. Everybody deserves a fair wage, and I think it's so important. And now we're going to hear a little bit more about fair wages for servers from Tsehaitu Abye, from the lead organizer from One Fair Wage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for sharing. You've got me hyped up, ready to go. So thank you all. Yes, my name is Tsehaitu Abye. I work with One Fair Wage, political organizer here in Pennsylvania. Just personally, I'm originally from Philadelphia. Also had the opportunity to live and grow up in Hawaii as well, and I've lived in California. I am an Ethiopian American, maybe first creative, you could say. Second woman, whatever you want to call it. I've worked in the creative space. I worked as a server here in Philadelphia. It's one of the things that I guess you could say drew me here. And also when we talk about the fight for 15, it's wild because it's so relevant to Pennsylvania. And then of course it's relevant to the rest of the nation. And thank you, Kadida. Yes. And I appreciate you just for saying so much about this movement, and it's great to have partnership with the work that you're doing as well. So One Fair Wage, we're a national coalition, and we focus on raising the minimum wage, but more in particular, eliminating the sub-minimum wage. And so you all have been talking specifically about Pennsylvania, right? And the minimum wage here being $7.25, also the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers being $2.83 an hour, excuse me. And on top of that, right, the federal sub-minimum wage is $2.13. So we're a couple cents ahead of the federal sub-minimum wage. Maybe that's kind of nice. But the sad part about this, and the part that I don't know if a lot of people understand, is that tipping is a legacy of slavery. Okay. So, you know, back in that Jim Crow era, right, when restaurant owners, excuse me, needed to hire people, well, they didn't want to pay Black workers. So they came up with this tipping system. And I find it interesting because, to be honest, as a server here in Philadelphia over the past couple years, I didn't know that. And also let me acknowledge, I actually have 2 degrees, a business owner. So I'm one of those people who are using that service industry pay to get by as a Black woman. And so for me, as I work as an organizer across the state, and I share this with a lot of folks, you know, it's startling, it's shocking, right? Because for many of us, right, who've been in the service industry, we know why we get into the industry. It's because we need to make some money, right? Because we also know that the minimum wage is only $7.25. I've worked at $7.25 minimum wage coming back to Philadelphia and worked in a factory. And I worked for $7.25. It's very, very hard. Living in Pennsylvania showed me and reminded me that I'm a Black woman, right? And that's just adding on to the $7.25 that's already there. And basically what I'm acknowledging is the fact that in a lot of states, Black women get paid $5 less than white men in these different environments. So I just want to, you know, it's easy to talk about it, right? But the reality is, like, these are our lives. And so when we know tipping is a legacy of slavery, right? When we're having these conversations with my fellow servers, my fellow bartenders, that's often the first shocking thing. But it also feels real in COVID. It feels so much more real in COVID. Because now we have my peers, people that I don't know, people that we do know are having to go into work and risk their lives every day. And a lot of people around this state still don't even know that the people who are serving their food are only getting paid $2.83 and are relying on the tips. And while many of you have already kind of discussed these different disparities and just what it's like and why we're fighting, right? Now imagine someone only has 2 shifts at work. A mother, a daughter, a son, they have children, right? They only have 2 shifts at work. And now one of their shifts, someone doesn't pay the tip, doesn't pay $100 tip. That's their livelihood. That's literally their livelihood. Now think about COVID has made it even harder. Some people don't have their IDs. Now they're upset. I can't celebrate and get those martinis. And we get it. but just understanding like this is a dire issue at this point. On top of it, our peers who are working right now, our tipped workers, they're not safe. They're not all getting the PPE that they need. Hopefully many of us know that Governor Wolf recently opened up restaurants, announced that restaurants could open up to 25% capacity indoors, right? And so most of the summer, since the restaurants have been open, workers have been outdoors, right? So there's been all this outdoor dining, and it's been challenging already with outdoor dining, besides the fact that a lot of restaurants have actually closed down. And unfortunately, for so long, in terms of policy, tipped workers have often just been left out. And in this crisis that we're happening, I think it seems as though the problem has been exacerbated even more, right? Of what these issues are. In addition, we've also discussed this sexual harassment. I don't know if anybody knows this, but the service industry has the highest rate of sexual harassment, the highest rate. Now add on COVID, add on your person of color. So the highest rate of sexual harassment for women identifying people. And that doesn't necessarily even include other genders and those other experiences as well. And so just to make it clear, as we are organizing here in Pennsylvania with service staff, some of your favorite restaurants, I dare you to ask them how things are going. We're also organizing around the country right now. And so we've been organizing with New York, we've been organizing with Miami, with Chicago, with Massachusetts, with California, right? And I say this, I really, really say this because as we know, it is bad in Pennsylvania. And I want everyone to know, if you are a server, if you are that tipped professional, if you are working at a nail salon, if you're working as a driver even, understand that other people are suffering as well, but they're also fighting as well. And so people are fighting across the country for this, but it's true. A lot of people get, there's a lot of fear happening right now with Governor Wolf announcing that restaurants can be open 25% capacity. I have a lot of my servers that are also working as cooks. They're getting trained to work as cooks as well. For those who have the job, a lot of them don't have the job. And now we're hearing that they're going to open up restaurants to 50% capacity in about 2 weeks, which is even scarier. I have some bartenders saying, I can't make sure everybody wears a mask. If I'm telling somebody to wear their mask over and over again, they're going to get mad at me and take it out on me. So the issue is challenging. And I know we're focusing a lot on that restaurant industry because the restaurant industry brings thousands of dollars to this state. There's over 26,000 venues that offer food and drink. So just imagine the amount of revenue that can bring, but what is the life looking like for the actual person, the employee, the worker? And just on top of that, just to acknowledge, you know, when we talk about that sexual harassment and we talk about these conditions in the workplace, I want to acknowledge, right, we're creating memories. Your tipped professionals, right? Those folks who are getting that 283, they're not just swinging plates. They're creating memories for people. And for a lot of folks, they save up their money and that is a special moment. But let's ask ourselves, like, what is the life like for them? Some folks are having to see hundreds of people every day, or every week, I should say, and then having to go back home with their family. What are they going to do? They're suffering, dealing with unemployment issues. And just to close things out really briefly, just to acknowledge, back in March, we started a relief fund specifically for restaurant employees, tipped employees, because we knew that this was COVID was going to change everything. And just as a reminder, it was back in March that everything closed down. So many of our tip professionals have been out of work since March because many of those restaurants did not open back up. And the few that were able to reopen have very, very limited work. And in a lot of places, it's unsafe work. So the focus to the fight to eliminate this minimum wage and get everyone at $15 is more about money. It's about safety, livelihood, right? Because beyond that, it's about making sure our friends and our family are safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tsehaitu. That was great. I think that tipped workers are essential workers. And when we call people heroes who are on the front lines, we often forget about the other people who are on the front lines. Like, I think this COVID crisis has made us realize that everybody is a valuable participant within our economy. And that if you take one person out of that supply chain, there's a lot of other things that fall. We noticed that the price of meat and the price of chicken and the price of groceries has all changed, especially when all the restaurants were shut down. Farmers, grocery stores, all the people providing services that lead up to getting the food to the restaurant to serve are so important and invaluable. But we forget, we see what's on the surface, and then we forget about everything else behind the scenes. The cooks, the bartenders, the dishwashers, all the way back to the suppliers, to the farmers, to the growers. This is so important that we address this. And I think that when we're talking about people who have a high rate of exposure to COVID, these are all the people who are providing direct services to individuals. And to know that these individuals aren't even making a full wage and are relying for the majority of their pay from tips to ensure proper service is what I always was told tips stood for, and as an acronym. And most people don't know, and thank you so much for sharing that, that it does go back to slave wages and this idea that you didn't have to pay your server a fair wage unless they gave you proper service. And that was sort of like your excuse not to pay them. And we've reached a point where now we should be able to pay people a fair wage. And I've traveled a lot. I waitressed or served in bars and restaurants in Ireland and Germany. And in Germany, I was always so impressed. Their wait staff got 25 Deutschmarks an hour. And if you gave them a tip, it was just something a little bit extra, but it wasn't for their wage. They were able to have a livable wage as a server, not dependent on what restaurant they worked at, whether or not they served alcohol at the restaurant, but at any restaurant. This was the same idea of like somebody who stocked cans of food on a shelf. It's so important to make sure that the core and base wage of an individual is livable, because they shouldn't be dependent on the grace or gratitude of the people that they're serving. And I know that a lot of people are very good tippers, but to not know that you make $2.83 an hour and that most of that is gone from your paycheck for taxes or whatever. There's so many times I came home with a zero paycheck. It's so important to know these things. We have a really great panel today, and I wish we had a lot more people on the Zoom to ask you questions, because I know that all of you are so knowledgeable. I want to give everybody one last round to speak and answer one of these questions. Where do we want to be? What is the vision for a dignified life for an individual? And what is the legislation that's needed to get us there in the near future? And I think we can speak directly about a COVID recovery. So who would like to, I'd like to ask Cece to answer that first.
Sure. So, I mean, just to echo other comments at a state level, we do need the exemption to be eliminated. You know, we at a municipal level, we're so restricted as a third-class city on what we can and can't do. I would love to at some point be able to pass a first source hiring legislation that would be able to give priority to Allentown residents to these jobs that are coming in and the tax subsidized zones. But until the state is able to pass some of these pieces of legislation here at a local level, what we can do is, you know, we can pass things like community benefits ordinances. We can pass inclusionary zoning or workforce zoning, whatever term you want to use. You know, we can make sure that some of the CARES Act money that we are getting is going into eviction mitigation and going in to help the small businesses that are employing the servers. So those are things that we can do at a municipal level. There's a lot that the state needs to do, and even more that the federal government needs to do. But at a municipal level, the money that we do get, it's important that we're investing it in people and in small businesses, not just I guess Band-Aid solutions. So and I would say where do I see we'll know that that we are successful when we've empowered individuals, particularly individuals who are in marginalized communities, communities that have been oppressed systemically throughout centuries, throughout decades, that when we start crafting policy around those communities, all communities will be uplifted, because we all know that we're so interconnected that when one segment of society is being oppressed and being further marginalized, that affects us all. So when we start seeing policies at a local level and at a state level that are geared towards populations that just historically have not been included, I think that's when we'll start to see actual change and communities be empowered and invested. And it's not always like this. Sometimes things are done in a very paternalistic way where, oh, let me show you how to, garden. No, our communities know how to garden. I mean, we've got people who are coming from every country in the world where that's what you do. You grow your own fruits and vegetables. We don't need people to show us. What we need is the land. We need the space to do it. We need to own things. We need to be able to build up that generational wealth that so many folks have been able to, but some of us haven't, just because of the racism that's existed in this country. So having the ability to own land in our own communities, so that we can start attacking some of these health disparities. I saw in Philly they have a community garden trust, essentially, so that people can start doing that. So bringing some of those ideas that we are legally able to do from other municipalities throughout the Commonwealth, like having a community garden trust so that people can actually own the land that's in their neighborhoods, things like that. Those are things that we can do now. We don't have to wait on the state to do anything. We can just start it now.
Great. That's so important. I think Maria has a question, real quick. Maria, if you want to ask your question. Can't hear you.
A lot of what we're talking about really addresses this idea of charity and the difference between charity and really empowering people. Like, for example, when I was in high school, I was delivering leftover bread from Panera to public housing, and I felt like I was really helping, right? Able to give some food to people who would maybe not be able to afford it, but it's still like, it's a Band-Aid. It's not actually empowering people. And I also think about, I was a waitress through college and before that. And if you told me about getting rid of tips or raising the minimum wage, I'd be like, oh no, I like my tips, and people argue that. But then you really think about, wait, but I'm not getting health care, and wait, what about when I'm not when it's raining out, and then all of a sudden you're not making the same kind of money that you were before. But what really struck me, and when I learned about one fair wage, was what people have been going through with unemployment. So I was wondering if you can speak more about tipped workers and the struggles that they face to get unemployment, because I really think that that's something that people don't know about. I didn't know about, and I was a server.
Oh yeah, thank you for mentioning that. You brought up a lot of that, the nuances, right? Of like folks who know the service industry. You're right. They're asking these questions. And just to clarify on two parts, right? When we talk about getting a fair wage and eliminating the sub-minimum wage, it doesn't mean that people don't get tips. There's 7 other states in the US that are one fair wage states. For example, California. So while they're getting a base pay, they're also getting tips, right? People still practice that. It's in a way, it's a social norm. To add to that, when we say one fair wage specifically, we're actually talking about policy, and what we're doing, we're advancing policy. So there is a one fair wage bill that Representative Chris Rabb has already put in, and we're actually making it a bit more radical. And so specifically the challenges are, now think about the daily life of a server, you have to track your tips. You also kind of have to know how much you're making all the time, because only depending on a restaurant or the owner may decide to only document your credit card sales. What about all of your cash tips? So it requires tipped workers to keep their own accounting, do their own bookkeeping, essentially, right? Now that has everything to do with getting your unemployment. So what ends up happening, there could be just an issue with how you reported your tips. And now because of this unemployment and COVID, you have to make sure that you've tracked everything to get that accurate amount. Unfortunately, a lot of people are only getting unemployment based on, for example, and this is just an example, their credit card sales, which may not have been the accurate amount of sales. Other issues are happening is where some employers have actually closed down and they're not being the nicest and the most supportive when it comes to people getting their unemployment. An employer often has to approve that unemployment. And sometimes employers are creating additional problems that they don't need to. On top of that, because of that tipped issue, some employees have to just talk to a representative, because on the baseline, it might appear that they don't qualify for unemployment, which means they now have to talk to someone and they have to make an appeal. I can't explain to you how challenging it is to sit on a phone for unemployment, to go through that appeal process. And also in Pennsylvania, at least in the Philadelphia area, there's no office you can go to, so everything's on the phone. What we've been trying to do and what we've been doing is every few weeks we've been hosting a legal clinic where we bring on several lawyers from inland who are basically offering support and answering different questions, and then offering one-on-ones with different folks to be able to offer that specific assistance. So there's a lot of challenges here. And besides that, some of your favorite restaurants in Philadelphia are some of the worst culprits. And it's hard to have to say that, but it's true.
Thank you so much. That was so important. I know a lot of people have been having problems acquiring unemployment, and I can remember that was one of the issues. Anytime you left a restaurant or anything, it was so hard to justify any sort of unemployment. And I imagine now during COVID that's really difficult. So glad Rep. Rabb is ahead on that legislation. And finally, let's hear from Kadida, and we'll bring this full circle, okay?
Right. I just want to mention one more thing that Tsehaitu mentioned, and Representative Chris Rabb being a champion for not only raising the minimum wage, but all the other issues that we want to see addressed in House Bill 1215, which would, again, raise the minimum wage and not associate that with the cost of living until we get to $15 an hour. We don't want to have a COLA on $9.50 an hour. We want to get to 15 and address the cost of living, the ending of preemption, the one fair wage for tipped workers, and giving unions more power to organize as well, all part of House Bill 1215. We've been talking a little bit about hunger, and so, hunger was an issue here in Pennsylvania prior to COVID. It affects, prior to COVID, 1.7 million Pennsylvanians were experiencing hunger on a daily basis. That was almost 14% of Pennsylvania's population. And so we know that the hunger issues is rooted not because people need a hand up, a hand out. They need a hand up in raising the wage. a lot of the hunger issues comes from having a low wage here in the state of Pennsylvania. We talk about Philadelphia a little bit and the crime that's in Philadelphia. Well, a lot of that is associated with the fact that people aren't making a fair wage to feed their families, and that Philadelphia has one of the lowest, or the lowest, $7.25 an hour minimum wage of any first-class city in America, right? So all these things are associated with one another. So if we're talking about some of the solutions and some of the legislation that can move forward to help address some of these issues, we need to protect SNAP. We need to make sure that we are increasing the threshold on SNAP for folks. Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, right? The federal program fully funded by the federal government. Yet we have an announcement in yesterday's news that the Trump administration is removing that funding during this pandemic time, making it harder for folks who are receiving EPT, or otherwise known as food stamps, to be able to feed their families, children not attending schools and not having those meals while in school. So all these things need to be addressed. We need to pass some legislation to ensure that we can get free and reduced lunches for kids. There are some municipalities, and Philadelphia, I believe, they're working towards making sure that kids can access food during this time when they're home. But that's not, a statewide thing. That's things that are happening in particular areas. And so we do need to address the food crisis here in Pennsylvania, which has been with us prior to COVID. So let's not get that confused. So there's a few solutions here, and I'll list them out. We can protect and expand the SNAP benefits here in the state. The Department of Health and Human Services should increase the SNAP in-cold threshold to 200% of the federal poverty line. So again, missing one paycheck changes lives. And then there's also that assumption that if we take the minimum wage from $7.25 to $9.50, that folks are going to be in that gap space and not be able to receive benefits. Well, let's increase the threshold. We can also make sure that children, again, are benefiting from free and reduced lunch, and then target public transit spending to low food access communities, and pursue a good food purchasing policy on the state level. So these are some of the things that our legislators can do to help feed families here in the state. The one thing I wanted to bring up too, as we're closing out, we talked a little bit about the housing situation here in the state. And again, this was an issue prior to COVID, right? So things in COVID are just being exacerbated. They already existed. And so some of the solutions that the We the People campaign and our legislative agenda we're pushing for, we want to make sure that we're providing assistance to people with their rent and mortgage payments. We want to, though we know that there's that moratorium from the CDC on the federal level, and we're understanding that Governor Wolf doesn't really have too much control of this through his executive powers. But there are things we can do here on the state level. Our legislators can do, our General Assembly can do, creating a moratorium on evictions, foreclosure, utility shutoffs, and a good cause eviction requirement, fully funding the state's homeowner emergency mortgage assistance program. And then also what Representative Fiedler had mentioned earlier, the PHFA, the rental assistance program. We need to make sure that it's easier for folks to qualify and self-certify for these programs, because that's one of the issues right now. It's a lot of paperwork, a lot of hoops to jump through. We need to make this easier for folks, not harder. Expanding investment in housing for the homeless. Obviously, if you're paying attention to anything that's happened in Philadelphia, there's a serious situation for those who are unhoused at this time, making sure that we have affordable housing and that the conditions are good. I mean, at this point right now, there are situations where there are slumlords, we've had them prior to COVID, making sure that we have homes that are free from health hazards, and then changing our zoning laws to encourage affordable housing in gentrifying communities, because affordable housing is not affordable for everybody. So there's just a few things that we can do legislatively, and you can push your legislators to do these things. And so Maria asked the question earlier, is this all about, just helping people, or can they help themselves? Well, we can help ourselves through pushing our legislators to do the right thing. And it's election time, so what's the better time to do it than now, when they want our votes?
It is the perfect time. And I know that these issues are very important to me. I don't think it's radical to think that if you work 40 hours a week, that you should get a fair wage, that you should be able to afford housing, that you should be able to have food on your table. I don't think it's radical to think that we need to fund these programs. And I think that is part of a dignified life, being able to provide these things for yourself and to be able to live in the circumstances where you can get a job and have a fair wage so that you can put food on your table, so that you can afford your rent, is critical. No one wants to just keep receiving a handout or charity, because there is a certain dignity in being able to achieve that yourself. And I'm not saying that people who don't, but we're really who aren't achieving that now are not dignified, but we are humanity. And I think we have dropped the thread on why it is that we have structured our society to include a workforce. We don't just work for other people so that they can have wealth. There are so many people in the workforce now who are struggling, and they deserve a dignified life. They should be able to achieve this working a 40-hour work week. And now we know that people are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. One of the things that I did on Northampton County Council was I was presented with a resolution to increase the supplemental food purchase program budget. That budget has not been increased since 2006, and it was funded at $18.9 million. And that's the food that's used to purchase groceries and fresh foods and meats and things like that, from grocery store surplus to like places like Second Harvest or Project Easton, where they are food banks or places where people can go and supplement their food that they normally would get but don't have the wage to be able to have. And I want to note that food banks are now open after 5 o'clock because there are so many working families using them. But this supplemental food purchase program is now currently funded at $18.9 million. And we have not seen an increase in the budget, even though that we know that food has gone up, transportation costs have gone up, all these things associated, and there is more demand. We need to properly fund these programs, because this isn't just a handout, it's trying to get a step up to where we need to be. And if we're going to talk about equity and justice, we have to make it a playing field that's more level so that people can attain and acquire these things through their own efforts, through work, and achieve this dignified life. I want to thank everybody for coming today and for speaking. Especially I want to thank Cece, Kadida, and Tsehaitu. It was so important and critical that you were here today, and I can't wait for people to see this. So again, my name is Zrinski. I am running for PA State House in the 138th District. These issues are very important to me, and I hope that they're important to you. So for now, we're going to say bye, and thank you for joining us. Have a great day.